The Future of Coaching is Team Coaching podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, an international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide.
We're your hosts, Georgina Woudstra and
Allard Jong, that's me.
We're coaches, writers, and the founders of the Team Coaching Studio.
In this series, we explore the exciting, dynamic, and fast-growing discipline of team coaching.
Our ambition is to contribute to the quality and impact of team coaching worldwide and to share insights and experience that will inspire you to keep developing as a team coach. Welcome to episode 3 of our podcast, The Future of Coaching is Team Coaching. In the last 2 episodes, we talked about, firstly, what is team coaching and why team coaching is so important. And then we also talked about what is real team coaching. In this episode, we're going to talk about team coaching competencies. And I'm joined by my colleague, Allard Jong. Hi, Al.
He's never far away.
Never far away. And I thought we ought to start this episode talking about team coaching competencies first by thinking about what is a team versus a group. Because if this is team coaching, then we really need to be clear on what is a team. What is that we're coaching? What is the entity of a team?
Yeah, and maybe I think last time we referenced the ICF a couple of times. I think in our talk. And so, to be fair, maybe today we could bring the Association for Coaching into the picture. So, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't think I'm mistaken because I'm actually reading it from their website.
Okay.
But their definition of a team, which is as good as any, is as follows: a collaboration between a recognized group of people drawing upon individual capabilities and strengths, who are committed to working together interdependently to achieve a common purpose and collective performance and learning goals. And I really want to underline this notion of a common purpose and collective goals. We had the case yesterday, Georgina, didn't we? Where we were actually working with a team, a Danish team.
Yes.
And
yes, that's right.
Which was really more of a committee than a team, and didn't seem to have that common purpose laid up at all, and a lack of clear leadership as well to compound the fact. But it felt more like working with a group than working with a team.
Yeah, and for me, the difference that made it feel like working with a group was that each team member was very wedded to their own role or their area of interest. And there was little identification with any common purpose or common outcome or need to work together. And until that's established, then really we're working more with the I in a team than the we in a team. And I would say team coaching is much more about the we.
Yeah.
Yeah. The AC go on to define team coaching, and I think that would be also really useful to get down, which they describe as the application of coaching skills whilst working with a whole intact team over time to improve interdependent members' ability to work together collaboratively to achieve the team's collective purpose, potential, and performance.
Yeah, there you go. The ability to work together collaboratively. I didn't tell you this, but so as we were coaching this team yesterday, and with a bit of a Gestalt slant, I think, on it. At one point, we're thinking of running a bit of an experiment with the team. And what came up to me only after the fact, a little bit too late. I wonder what you think of this, but I was about to ask the team members to speak and to interact, but talking as if they were the team. So not talking as individuals, but talking as I, the team. So I, the team, feel that, or I, the team, need, and in order to bring them from that level of I to what if I were speaking as the team?
Yeah, and if we were in person with the team, that would be really cool to create an object or a chair, let's say, that individual team members could sit on, so they actually sit or stand in a different position and speak from that different position. That's a fantastic experiment.
Yeah, I love your build on that. Actually, that's a nice segue into this notion of competencies. Because
yes.
I'm sure that what we're talking about indicates the application of certain competencies. So what do we mean since we are in the business of defining things today? It seems, what do we mean by a competency, or what do we mean by competencies?
Well, when I first trained as a team coach, when I first trained as a coach, I was trained on a set of competencies, and I'm sure any coach listening to this podcast would recognize competencies around effective listening and powerful questioning and establishing a coaching agreement. They're so core to every coaching practice. And I think they guide us on what is effective team coaching practice, as distinct from conceptual frameworks and models like Gestalt, that you've referenced earlier on today. That's a framework for looking at the world, a philosophical framework and an approach. But competencies, I think, are behavioural skills which are observable and measurable and learnable by coaches in order to start to get those skills in the bones so that we can coach fluidly in the moment.
Yeah, and it's good to have a competency framework, because ultimately it is an indication of what constitutes good practice, good team coaching.
Yeah, we can be assessed by that, and all coach training schools will shape their training in some form around competencies. And if you get professional body accreditation of some form, then that would be competency based as well.
Yeah. So it might feel easy to kind of get lost in this jungle of different competency frameworks that are out there nowadays. And the AC have a competency framework, the ICF do, and EMCC have a coaching framework. And we were talking with the EMCC the other day, actually, and kind of daydreaming about, well, wouldn't it be great if one day we were able to build like a meta model of all these different competency models? But we're not there yet. And then at the team coaching studio, when was it, Georgina? I think it was back in 2017 that you first developed the team coaching studio competency wheel.
Yes, yeah, it had been there underneath our practice since about 2012. But in 2017, did a whole bunch of work to clarify it into a framework, and we articulate it as the TCS team coaching wheel. And for anyone who's interested in this, there'll be a white paper called Your Journey to Team Coaching Mastery, which describes this TCS wheel framework in the podcast notes. So the TCS wheel is an inside-out model, as we've described in previous episodes, starting at the heart with philosophy and stance, your core beliefs around change, around leadership, around teams, and importantly, what you're there to do as a team coach, what you represent as a team coach. Outside of philosophy and stance, the next circle are our three meta skills of presence, use of self, and active experiments. They are the core toolkit, a methodology for change. They're a way of bringing the desired change into the here and now, which is one very distinct attribute of team coaching versus facilitation. Again, we talked about that in the last episode.
Yeah, and then it's the next ring out that outlines the 12 competencies grouped in 5 different clusters. And I realize it's not easy for people maybe to follow this without having the model in front of them. So we'll try to keep it as simple as we can. But that first cluster, the first of 5 clusters of competencies, is called setting the foundation.
Yeah, and then the next one's co-creating the relationship. And I expect that language will be recognisable to many coaches. The third one's fostering effective communication.
And then we get on to, I think, something very, very specific to working with teams, which we've called working with systems and dynamics. So working with power structures, working with stakeholder groups, and working with interpersonal dynamics, etc. All that's grouped under the cluster of working with systems and dynamics. And then the series of 5 ends with a cluster called facilitating learning and growth. Again, probably very familiar language for most coaches listening to this.
And in the next episode, we're going to zoom in on setting the foundations and contracting. And in fact, we've been running a lot of masterclasses on contracting in team coaching lately, because it's so important to get off to a right start. If we don't get off to a good start in coaching, then it tends to play out throughout the coaching assignment. So that'll be a very interesting podcast episode to explore. But we thought in this one we'd zoom in on working with systems and dynamics, because it's such a distinctive requirement really for working with teams, and the competences that we have in that cluster are probably different to competencies that coaches have encountered in their one-to-one coaching development.
Yeah, and so specifically, if we bear in mind the 12 competencies, that would represent competencies 8, 9, and 10, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Not that the numbers matter, but just to kind of situate them.
So let's start with number 8, which we call focus on relationships in the system. And this is about the ability to serve the team collectively as a team. So focusing on the we, whilst acknowledging and valuing the I in the team. So this competency is about working with the team as an entity. And in your experience, Al, why is that so important?
Well, I think that matters because in team coaching, the client we have one client, and that's the team. And maybe that goes back again to this notion of teams versus groups. We're not here to serve the individual learning needs of a group of individuals. We're here to serve the collective learning need for this one team.
Yeah, and that is a bit like your example you were talking about a few minutes ago about the Danish team, that without a collective purpose, the team members showed up from an individual I position. That's totally normal. That's what they're focused on. That's what's in front of them and what their interests are. So our work as team coaches using this competency is really inviting the team to move from I to we. And you gave a brilliant example of that, of asking the team, what would it be like to respond to this question from as a team we need to? That's a lovely way of bringing it to life.
Yeah, and it's and I think this also has to do with the need to generate a conversation amongst the team members, and not just a series of conversations between team members and team coaches, to really help them have a more effective conversation together, and that when something needs to be said, that it's not said, that it's not triangulated to the team coach, but that we get to a point where they're able to speak to each other in a way that serves the collective.
Yeah, that's really important. I think anyone who's been team coaching for any amount of time will encounter a situation where a team member starts talking with them about the leader or about another team member that they're having an issue with. And before you know it, you're getting pulled in to a role that you're not intending to play. You're getting invited to be the messenger or the problem solver between two people. So in this competency, about avoiding triangulation, it's learning how to support team members to connect the dots, to have the conversation with each other. And oftentimes they're the conversations that people avoid. So individual team members may need some support in having the courage and the words to say what they need to say in order to reconnect what's become disconnected in the system of the team.
That's so interesting, because that reminds me of David Cantor's work, and I know that we've spoken about that before in one of our diploma classes, I think.
Yes.
But how Cantor speaks about different roles, right, in groups or in teams, and he has the movers and the opposers and the followers and the bystanders, and how I think focusing on those relationships in the system also gives us permission to maybe at one point support some of the opposers if that's what's missing in the team, or support some of the followers, or support the moves if that's what's required.
Yes, yeah, great example. In working with teams over the years, I've been with teams many times where let's say there's a team of 7 or 8 people and only 3 people are having the majority of the airtime, or 7 are and 1 person sitting there quietly. Now we can intervene a bit like a facilitator would by inviting the voice of the person who's quiet, or we can pause the team and ask them to notice the pattern of interaction, notice who's speaking and who's not speaking, and then to re-enter the conversation, trying to calibrate the airtime between them as an experiment. So we have different choice points of how we can coach that competency.
And I really like this thing that I've seen you do before on several occasions, which is where you invite different team members to play back what they've heard another team member say before building on that idea.
Yes, yeah, that can work really well. Inviting John to play back what he heard Mary say before bringing in a build or a divergent idea.
Yeah.
And when we bring in a divergent idea, often that original idea, which may have had some real value, just gets lost.
Exactly. So what I just heard you say is this, that, or the other, and my build on that would be this, that, or the other.
Yes.
And that's just such an elegant and yet very direct way of helping the team go from I to we. The trick there, I think, is not just setting it up as we've just described, but is then helping the team stick with it. Because what often happens is that they'll do it for 30 seconds and then they'll forget that that's what the experiment was, and they'll move on to something else.
Yes, especially when passion rises.
Yes, yeah,
and the energy takes over in a moment. I think the other tip there is to encourage the team to pause. So play back what you heard and pause. Check that you have got it before building on what's said. These little micro experiments can really build capacity in a team in a very simple but elegant way.
Yeah.
Let's think about the next competency number 9. But I'd love to hear what you were going to say.
Well, I was just going to say that I think this is related to another competency, maybe somewhere around, effective relating or direct communication or something. But I think that if you work together as a pair of team coaches, as a pair of interveners, then I think it's really useful to model some of those behaviors, to be an example of those behaviors that the team wants to make their own.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's really valuable to model those behaviors because many people may not have really observed or experienced them in action. If we haven't experienced something, we don't know the value of it.
Yeah.
I remember in my original coach training doing an exercise, perhaps you did something too, where you're put with a partner and person A talks for like 3 minutes about something that's really important to them, and person B listens. And sometimes the impact on person A is they can be brought to tears just by the fact they're being listened to, because it's so rare. But if they just read that, listened to somebody more, it wouldn't have the same depth of impact that comes through experience. So keeping a team in a practice and an experience, and then debriefing it. What was the benefit? What did you notice about replaying what your colleagues said and checking for understanding?
Help them make some meaning.
Yes, make some meaning. And it's only when we make meaning that we actually start to learn. It's a cycle of awareness raising, experimentation, trying something new, putting it into practice, and then reflecting on that starts to build that new capacities into the team. And then, of course, keeping it up, sticking with it.
That's a beautiful little kind of unit of work that you just outlined there.
Yes, yeah. And simple, isn't it? It's not easy.
Simple.
But simple.
No, and again, the recommendation is sticking with something until that little unit of work, that little cycle is complete.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's...
we both want to go to the same place. Competency 9.
Yeah, so this is about engaging with that wider context that the team's located in, and with the team's stakeholders, of which there are often many with a team. How do you think about this competency, Al?
You just mentioned a memory that you had of an early days activity in coach training, and that brought to mind one of my experiences where a whole group of us trainees had, we all were given a piece of string, and then I'm sure some of you will recognize this exercise, and we were then asked to tie our piece of string to another person's piece of string, etc., and holding on to one end of the string, I should say, and tying the other piece to all the other pieces of string that were out there. And then spreading out, holding our little piece of string in one hand, spreading out in the room until this kind of spider web of pieces of string, got under some tension. And then I think that's still one of the best activities to have a lived experience of what it's like to be part of a system. Because as soon as a person in the other side of the room pulls a little bit on their piece of string, given that they're all tied together, it has an impact on you. And so we're always working in a wider context, and there's always expectations from different elements in that context. And how do we make that more visible? And so I think the language we often use is, how do we bring more of the system into the room?
Yeah, I love that example of the string exercise. Again, it's something that creates so much more connection with the experience of being part of a system than just saying the words, you're part of a system. Realizing the interconnectedness of all things is so powerful. It's a brilliant example. And, our role as coaches is finding a way, as you say, of bringing the system of the team into the room in order to create awareness and also to create connection between the team and its wider system. So it's essentially about coaching the relationships between entities in a system. Coaching the point of impact between members. So this even in a small team. There's a team I'm coaching at the moment where one team member's been really, really involved and very, very central to the team's functioning and to their success as an organisation. And due to a family situation, she's now taking a 6-month sabbatical. And it's having a huge impact on the team and their capability, not just because of the tasks that she did, but because of the tremendous strengths and qualities she brought to the team, such as, clarity, speed, forward motion. And that's a little bit like if that was the string exercise. That's a bit like if you had 4 people around in a circle, each holding the piece of string, and then one person drops the point they're holding and walks away.
Yeah.
And how does the team readjust to hold that, or is someone else invited in?
Yeah, and I think that's another reason why we keep implying, or why we keep arguing that the future of coaching is team coaching. Because why would you just coach one piece of string?
I love that.
No, yeah, but yeah. And if that piece of string is affected by all the other pieces of string, and you could imagine we did that string exercise in 3 different rooms at the same time.
Yeah.
As a team of teams, and then tied all that together, then you could ask yourself, why just coach this one team, and why not coach the larger system? So what are some ways then, if we wanted to bring the larger system into the room, how might we go about doing that? How create some awareness around how we all impact and affect each other? Great
question. I guess that, as with all things in coaching, people tend to follow what other people do, and they look out there at what are the tools or methods that other people are doing. So the real trend at the moment is to go and gather stakeholder input, do 360 data as a way of bringing greater awareness into the room. Now that can be done through some form of diagnostic or assessment. It's also really powerful to invite the team that you're coaching to go gather that data. So I worked with a team, it's quite a large team, and between sessions, the challenge that they chose to accept was to each team member to speak to 3 different stakeholders, but ask them the same questions. I think it was something like, what do you most value about our team? What do you most need about our team? What do you think is our area of learning or growth? Something like that.
Yeah.
And then they all brought back those answers to the team coaching session, and we put them all up on a wall to create a map, and then invited the team to work together to extract the meaning of that, whilst us coaches observed that in action. The observation in action, us observing the team working on this, gave a chance for us to observe both their attitude and their relationship with stakeholder needs. And really interesting, I remember in that one, two people got off in a huddle and didn't engage with the exercise. They went off into a corner and were laughing and joking, whilst the rest of the team were all up doing the work. As coaches, use that in the debrief and ask them what the relationship felt like for them between them and the data that was on the board, and what the significance of it was for them. So again, reconnecting what had become disconnected in the system. So that's one way.
Lovely. Yeah, and I know that you and I are both fans of the field of dialogue with
Yes.
a capital D, and all the work that's being done through the Association of Professional Dialogue by Peter Garrett and Jane Ball.
That's right.
Lots to learn there from them. Go check that out. I mean, dialogue is work that can be done with, needs to be done with large groups. And so once we start to hit 20 people or so or above, then dialogue is a great way to bring more of the system into the room. And another little favorite of mine, a little go-to exercise when I don't know what to do, is the empty chair. And so you can, the empty chair that comes from the world of Gestalt psychology, Gestalt therapy. If you're not familiar with that, Google it, and it's not difficult to wrap your mind around. So the empty chair exercise is good too.
Yeah, very powerful ways. And then the third one that is just very simple coaching questionings, powerful questions from the coach, asking about what the future needs of them. So a team I'm coaching at the moment, there's been so much change in their environment. They're in local government. They're facing, chronic financial shortages after years of austerity. The kind of cutbacks now where they'll be working on less than 20% of the budget that they were 10 years ago. And yet there's been vast population increase, big increase in needs of aging people, etc., etc. And let alone the climate change issue and on all those future needs. And the team were stuck in, we just can't cut anymore. But by asking them the question of exploring, what does the emerging future need from you? Paint a picture of what the future of 10 years' time, what you think that looks like. Yeah. And what's your role as a leadership team in relation to that? That shifted their mindset into much more of a solutions-focused mindset, of recognizing their role as leaders in shaping the journey from where they are now to where the future is likely to be.
Well, again, lots of ideas for people to experiment with. I just wanted to remind everyone that we're talking about this cluster of competencies called Working with Systems and Dynamics. We just looked at competency 8, focusing on relationships in the system.
Yeah.
9, engaging with the wider context and stakeholder expectations. And maybe we could spend these last 5 minutes, Georgina, talking about working with power and authority, because whether we like it or not, every team comes with a power and authority structure.
It does. And one of the things I've noticed is when we start talking about power with coaches, there's often a bit of a, drawing of breath. I don't really like thinking about power, which is interesting in itself and something that we need to look at as team coaches, especially our own relationship with power, just because of just what you've said, that power exists in any organizational structure.
Yeah, and depending on our own value system, we may not, that whole notion of power over may not sit right with us. But it's important that we understand and work with the power and authority structure that are there in a team system without trying to impose our own over it.
Yeah, or the power or authority structure that they're looking to shift towards.
I just wanted to throw out a couple of questions to take away. So when they think about working with power and authority, I think there's a first interesting question, which is when you work with teams, what do you pay attention to? As related to power and authority. So do you pay attention to the type of leadership that's playing out? Do you pay attention to how leadership problems really are not always how leadership problems go beyond the leader and are systemic in nature by themselves? Do you pay attention to how decisions are made?
Do you pay attention to how the leader is leading Or do you pay more attention to the team members, hoping to level out leadership and give them more voice because that's the style that you prefer? Where do we go to in this?
And then what do you support? What do you give as a team coach? What do you give support to in this power and authority structure?
That's right. Based on your contract of the work that we're there to do.
Yeah.
Again, I can give there's an example of the impact of leadership or the leadership void in a system that Declan Woods and I wrote about in a chapter called Into the Void in the Team Coaching Casebook. Why it's an interesting story is that something I've noticed quite a lot over the last decade or so of team coaching is that at least in the teams that I've coached, many leaders seem to really struggle with taking up leadership, taking up the baton of leadership and offering any direction, offering their view. They've kind of gotten the idea that everything needs to be done through collaboration or consensus, or some leaders have. And in large teams and in fast-paced organizations, the impact of that is people, often team members running around doing what they think is important, but it's not coordinated into a whole. Yeah. And this is really what we experienced as a leadership void. The dominant voices in the team were gaining traction and others were being suppressed because leadership wasn't channeling energy. I think of it a little bit like that metaphor we use in contracting sometimes, that a river without riverbanks just becomes a muddy plain. Leadership's providing those riverbanks to channel the energy.
It's a lovely example of deciding what to, illustrating what to pay attention to, and then deciding what you want to support. Yeah. And then the third question that came up is something you might want to think about is what is your counter-transference in relation to authority, or in simpler terms, what gets stirred up in you when in the presence of authority and power. I think for coaches, it's very important to be aware of that, because it is going to play out, and it might be something you want to take to supervision at one point or another. I know that I can get very rebellious depending on the type of authority that I'm faced with, but I can also really fall into deep deference to power. So either way, something for me to definitely keep working on.
That's amazing self-awareness, and when you're working with a team, how do you use that self-awareness?
One thing that's always on my mind is that little STS framework of self, team, and situation. And so trying to float my attention from what's happening for me, what may be happening with the team, and thirdly, how is the larger situation impacting or configuring or limiting the work that we're doing. And so it is flowing my attention to self and being aware of what's coming up for me, and seeing if that's useful data somehow to throw back into the equation and add to the awareness of the team. I'm all for sharing how the team is impacting me, because I think that's just as powerful an awareness raiser as asking an awareness raising question of the team.
Yeah, it's a great example. Again, I'm hearing, when your attention's gone to either the leader is being, say, too autocratic, or you're noticing that you're becoming too deferential, that you're shifting your awareness, consciously shifting it to the situation, here's the work to be done, or to the team, so outside of yourself, in order to regulate that balance. And I think that's such an effective tool and a mastery tool for team coaches, to be able to consciously shift our presence and our attention rather than get consumed by our own beliefs or triggers or needs. Yeah, that's a
and like
example.
I said, I think that's why I'm such a big believer in an increasingly big believer in supervision. So anyway, there's a lot more that we could say about these three competencies, but like as you said, Georgina, earlier, there's going to be a link somewhere down below, as they say. Click on that for for that white paper that really describes all of the competencies in a lot more detail.
Or read the book, Mastering the Art of Team Coaching, which is structured through the competency framework and the wheels. So
I thought that was sold out.
maybe it is by 10 o'clock today.
I tip my hat to the printers who are doing a great job to keep up with the demand.
Is that an example of deference?
Well, no, deference was yesterday. I remember we were working with a new group in Brazil, Georgina, weren't we, yesterday? And,
yes.
And we both had to introduce ourselves. And I found, after you had introduced yourself, I found no better way of introducing myself than saying, I'm Batman I'm Robin to Batman. And that seemed to work. And I think that was a case of deference.
Yeah. And of self-awareness in that moment. And then you suddenly you didn't engage or show up as Robin to my Batman. You just named it.
A case of knowing your place, yes.
Good example. Okay, so that's us for today. We look forward to the next podcast where we'll dive a bit deeper into setting the foundations and in particular into effective contracting in team coaching. I'm really looking forward to that.
Good one, yeah. All right. Goodbye for now, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. I'm Georgina Woudstra.
And I am Allard de Jong. For 20 years, the AC's purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organizations, and society at large.
To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our webpage at associationofcoaching.com. There you can keep up to date with our latest podcast episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insight from the Coaching Perspectives magazine.